Hello, I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has appealed to Russian people to seek out the truth for themselves about Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. In a video message directed to the Russian population, Boris Johnson said they only needed an online VPN connection to gain access to independent information from around the world. It's after the mayor of the Ukrainian town Bucha has accused Russian troops of deliberately killing civilians during their month-long occupation of the town. The Kremlin denies the allegations.
The atrocities committed by Russian troops in Bucha, Irpin and elsewhere in Ukraine have horrified the world. Civilians massacred, shot dead with their hands tied, women raped in front of their young children, bodies crudely burned, dumped in mass graves or just left lying in the street. The reports are so shocking and so sickening, it's no wonder your government is seeking to hide them from you. Your president knows that if you could see what was happening, you would not support his war.
Boris Johnson speaking there. Ukraine's president has called for Nuremberg-style trials after accusing Russia of committing what he called the most terrible war crimes since World War II. Speaking via video link at the United Nations Security Council in New York, Volodymyr Zelensky warned of further Russian cruelty in other Ukrainian towns and villages. His comments followed United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres warning that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is one of the greatest challenges ever to international world order. President Zelensky described in detail the attacks across the country.
Russian troops are deliberately destroying Ukrainian cities to ashes with artillery and airstrike. They are deliberately blocking city, creating mass starvation. They deliberately shoot columns of civilians on the road trying to escape from the territory of hostilities. They even deliberately blow up shelters where civilians hide from airstrikes.
The UK, US and Australia have agreed to work together on hypersonic and anti-hypersonic weaponry. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, US President Joe Biden and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison say it is part of the AUKUS military pact that was announced last year. The three countries reiterated their unwavering commitment to an international system which they say respects human rights. Here in the UK, the government has commissioned a review of the latest scientific evidence on fracking. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has written to the British Geological Survey asking for a report on the latest evidence around the extraction of shale gas. Since 2019, there has been suspension on the process as it is not possible to accurately predict tremors associated with fracking. D-Day veteran Harry Bilenge has died aged 96. The former Royal Engineer was 18 years old when he was one of the first British soldiers to land on Gold Beach in 1994. He was one of only 4 survivors from his unit. He later fought in Caen and Falaise Pocket in Normandy. His daughter Sally Bilenge Shandley said some of his last words were "love one another." TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Farage.
Good evening. Over the last couple of years, I have done my absolute best to make people aware of what was happening across the English Channel. I did it because as the small boats began to arrive in larger and larger numbers, I noticed that mainstream media weren't talking about it. Well, they are now. In 2019, 1,843 people were recorded crossing the English Channel and taken in by the authorities. In 2020, that figure leapt to 8,466. Last year, the figure was revised upwards and it was 28,526. And so far, this year, it's 4,555, which is 3 times the number that had crossed the channel at this stage last year. It's impossible, really, to put a number on how many will cross this year, but it's not difficult to say it could well be between 50 and 100,000 people. Why does it matter that so many, and about 90%, are young men? Why does it matter that so many young men without documentation are crossing the channel? Well, it matters for reasons of cost. It matters because of the crisis of housing. It matters because of the grounds of national security. But it matters because particularly Conservative voters, and especially those Conservative voters in red wall seats, are furious. They thought voting Brexit, they thought voting Boris Johnson in 2019 meant getting back control of our borders, not, frankly, being walked all over by criminal trafficking gangs. And so an idea that's been doing the rounds for some time now looks to be very, very close to fruition. It may well be agreed in Cabinet tomorrow. And it is the concept of offshore processing. So somebody arrives, is picked up in the English Channel, taken into the processing centre at Dover, and then would be flown off to Rwanda, where they would be processed. What are the upsides of doing that? Well, I guess one upside is to show the country that something is being done. The other upside is it may well act as a disincentive for people to pay 3,000, 5,000 euros to a trafficker if they think they're going to finish up in Rwanda. What are the downsides of this? One, it will cost a very, very great deal of money. And two, there is a risk that large numbers of people being held in a country like Rwanda will actually be held in conditions that we don't find acceptable, that many international observers begin to condemn, and we see cases of exploitation and abuse. That is the biggest risk on the downside. That is why the Australians, having started with offshore processing, in the end dropped it. But I guess if you're Priti Patel, what else can you do? All the while we're signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights, sending people straight back to France simply isn't an option. This is being done because there's nothing else they can think of to do. So you tell me, will this solve the cross-channel crisis? I want your views, please. Farage at gbnews.uk. My own view is, in the short term, it might help. I don't think it's a long-term solution. Well, joining me now is Philip Trott, Senior Counsel at Vanessa Gangwin, immigration lawyer. Philip, it's quite within international law to do this, isn't it?
I am not so sure you're right about that, because if you have a principle which permits an individual to be arrested and detained and then shipped offshore, there are certain fundamental rights that an individual has to fair process. And we know that Priti Patel has just lost fairly significantly the process that she was going through of seizing mobile phones of immigrants so that they couldn't access legal advice, and they were also put in a position where where the government was attempting to find out who the people traffickers were. So she's certainly got a lot of egg on her face, and I fear that she's going to have even more egg on her face any minute now if this comes into law. For example, how on earth would an individual be able to access quality immigration lawyer advice from Rwanda? How on earth? That's just very trite.
Well, I mean, I guess, Philip, people like you, well, maybe not you yourself, but people like you will relocate to Rwanda because there'll be plenty of business on tap, and that advice will be paid for and provided by the British government, won't it?
I have absolutely no idea, because there's been no statement about what facilities will be available. What we do know, and you've highlighted it in your introduction, is that the Rwandan government haven't exactly got a shining reputation for their treatment of anybody. I mean, I don't want to run the risk of the station being sued for libel, so I won't. But you've already highlighted the very serious issues, and I think I do not believe that this is going to stop people traffickers trafficking people, and I think there's probably going to be a lot more infringement of liberties in Rwanda rather than infringement of liberties in the United Kingdom.
No, I mean, look, I completely understand that risk, and I'm not giving this my full support and backing. I do think in the short term it might be a deterrent to people paying traffickers. I just don't know. I think it might be. But, I mean, let's face it. These people are crossing the English Channel illegally. They don't have documentation. We haven't got a clue who they are. And the numbers, and I gave a fairly broad band earlier on, but let's say somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people will come this year. Well, it's already costing £1.7 billion a year to hire those who are seeking asylum. The government has to be seen to do something. So if it's not this, what on earth could they do?
Well, we've already had the former chief whip, former Secretary of State for the Home Department, David Davis, and one other minister plead against this provision as the bill is the current nationality borders bill is going through Parliament, and the cost of keeping a single migrant in a detention centre in Rwanda is in the region of I think the figures was £2 million a person. Now that can't be right. You can put people in the Ritz for less than that. So I'm not supporting the government, but at the same time, I think there has got to be a fair process. And at least when they are physically resident in the United Kingdom, there will be some fair process.
But is there anything else the government can do? Because if we give people fair process, and we know that very large numbers of those that apply for refugee status don't get granted it, yet very, very few ever seem to get returned, what can we do?
Well, I'm going to take issue with that statistic where you said very few are granted. In fact, that's quite the converse. It's in excess of 50% are granted refugee status, in excess. And I haven't got the figures to hand.
That strikes me as being a very low number.
Well, but at least if you were in their shoes, you would like your status to be respected rather than not respected. And I think it's pretty hard to have it respected when you're offshored.
So what happens to those whose claims fail? They just stay anyway, don't they?
Well, no. I mean, there is a process for returns, and I think the biggest issue is the fact that the government have been singularly inefficient when it's come to returning migrants, and we've seen horrendous cases of people who've been involved in criminality who happen to have stayed. But that's not the migrants' fault. That's the institution's fault. So the fact that they haven't been returned is unfortunate, but it shouldn't be laid at the door of the migrant.
No, it wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making is the government has to be seen to do something. But clearly, Philip Trott, the Rwanda plan does not inspire you in any way at all. And thank you for coming on and giving us your thoughts and comments on it. Thank you. Well, let's see what happens. We're expecting Boris Johnson to make some big announcement about this. If not him, it'll be Priti Patel. But it's not going to be straightforward and it's not going to be easy. Now, something that I think really is very, very disturbing is that the Wimbledon Tennis Championships are talking now quite openly about the world's #2 men's tennis player, Daniil Medvedev, not being allowed to play at Wimbledon. Nigel Farage MP, who was the sports minister, said this: "We wish to get assurance in a written declaration that they are not receiving money from Putin, Russia or Belarus, that they will not be making supportive comments of Putin, Russia or Belarus." Well, regardless whether that demand from the sports minister is made, it appears that Wimbledon's big concern is that Medvedev might win, and that Vladimir Putin would use that for propaganda purposes. I think to rule somebody out of Wimbledon simply because they're Russian is very, very disturbing indeed. What next? Are they supposed to denounce those that don't believe in climate change? Just how political will all of this get? Now, we're told that the All England Tennis Club, as a private organisation, could bar anyone it wants and not find itself in contravention of any law. They're being egged on by the sports minister. And I know we always talk about sport and politics being separate, and they can't always be that. I know that, I understand that, but it does seem to me that to say to a Russian, You must denounce what is going on. Well, what if your mum and dad still lived in Moscow? I think they're putting Medvedev in a simply impossible position. I think he's being discriminated against because he is Russian. That's how I feel. I think Wimbledon and Huddleston have really, really got this wrong, and it's a very disturbing direction. Well, let's get a view from Barry Flatman, retired tennis correspondent for the Sunday Times. Barry, have you ever seen anything like this in your time following tennis?
I haven't, but we haven't been in a situation where Russia is going to war with another country.
Well, that is true, but that isn't Medvedev's fault, is it?
No, it's not Medvedev's fault. Medvedev privately will tell people that he doesn't support the invasion. Alexander Rublev, the Russian second player, has made it blatantly clear that he doesn't support this invasion. He writes on the television screen, "Stop war," and that sort of thing. So, the tennis players aren't exactly flying the Russian flag in glory when they're playing at the moment.
But what if these tennis players, and there is also quite a good Belarusian male tennis player as well, what if these players just choose to say nothing, not to engage at all in the politics of it? Surely in those circumstances, if Wimbledon was to... I mean, they're not representing their country. It's not a national football team or cricket team. It's not a Davis Cup match. They're there as individuals. Barry, surely it would be outrageous for Wimbledon to do this.
I agree. If they're using it as a political soapbox, then by all means ban them. But they're not doing that. They have no history of doing that. So
from what I can understand, there is no recourse because the All England Tennis Club can allow in or not allow in anyone they want. Won't this damage the reputation of Wimbledon, which actually does ride pretty high in terms of public opinion?
It won't do it any good. I mean, I think Wimbledon are taking the view, let's just see what happens, rather than making a knee-jerk reaction now. But Wimbledon, being a private members club, can do what they want.
Yeah, and it does seem, though, Barry, just sort of final thought on this, it does seem that the biggest worry that Wimbledon have is that this guy might win it.
Yes, that would then become awkward, wouldn't it? But
well, it would become awkward.
We haven't had a Russian winner at Wimbledon since Maria Sharapova, and was she really Russian anyway? So it's not really going to come to that crunch, I don't think. But we shall see.
No, we really will, and this one's going to run and run. Barry, thank you for coming on and joining us to discuss this evening. Yeah, I must say, I really do feel very, very strongly about this indeed. It can't be right. Imagine you go into a Wetherspoons. You're somewhere in quiet North Norfolk. You could be in Swaffham. You could be in Fakenham. You pop into Spoons. Who do you bump into? But John Travolta. We'll discuss that in a moment.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
So, does jetting off those that land on Kent beaches or get picked up by Border Force or the RNLI to Rwanda, does it solve the Channel crisis? One viewer says, no, send them back to France in the exact same way that we would if they arrived on a flight with no passport or visa. Difficulty with that is our old friend, the ECHR. I know I keep saying it, but I'm not wrong. Grace says, yes, no one is going to pay traffickers thousands of pounds and take a risky journey in a dinghy to then be sent to Rwanda. That's the disincentive that I talked about. Sheni says, it's never going to happen. They're just saying it because the May elections are coming up. Gosh, what a cynical view of politicians that is. Yeah, you're probably right. Another says, not one person will leave. The courts won't allow it. Utter theatre. Trent says, it only works if you do it efficiently. When they land, when they bus them to a dedicated airfield and fly them out to Africa. Look, guys, this will be riddled with difficulty, but it does look like it's going to happen. Something, I guess, has to happen politically because they're in big trouble on this. Now, a very interesting ruling that came yesterday from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and it is all to do with the trans row. Now, this is not something that I cover very often on this programme, but I thought this juncture was a moment we should discuss this, because the judgment says, the ruling says, that trans women can legally be excluded from women's lavatories, changing rooms, and other single-sex spaces. And I suppose, you know, if you think, if there's a hostel, for argument's sake, that has in it women that have been abused and raped, they might take very serious objection to somebody who is trans finishing up in a hostel like that. We talk a lot about minority rights, and there's little doubt there have been huge step forwards in minority rights, in equality, and in fairness. But there is also the rights of the majority. And there are some that think this is a great ruling. The Daily Mail, huge screaming front page, huge boost for women's rights. That's how the Daily Mail feel about it. As I say, the majority have rights too. That's at least my feeling. But these are difficult, murky waters. Well, joining me, who better than Peter Tatchell, LGBT and human rights campaigner, and director, of course, of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Peter, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Were you surprised by this ruling, or has there been sort of in the wind some changes, you know, on this whole debate coming?
Well, first of all, the Equality and Human Rights Commission's guidance is just that, it's guidance.
Yeah.
It has no force in law whatsoever. It is merely a recommendation. What it seems to be saying is that there are certain legitimate circumstances where it would be proportionate to allow single-sex spaces to exclude trans women. That is the main thrust of what it's saying. But that, of course, goes against the core principles of the Equality Act, which is the actual law of the land, which is all about including trans people. Now, if we look at this issue in a dispassionate way, we can see that there are legitimate concerns about women's safety, and I support them. But it would be very wrong to generalize about all trans women. And the underlying narrative or presumption of much of this guidance is that trans women are a potential threat to biological women. And that is simply factually untrue. Most trans women are no threat to anyone, least of all biological women.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true, Peter, but there have been one or two grievous cases, haven't there? There have been cases in prison of trans women in women's prisons committing sexual assaults and rapes. I mean, these things have happened.
Well, you're right. It is a very tiny minority of cases. But of course, in a democracy, we don't make law based on exceptional circumstances or breaches of trust and law. We base the law on the generality. So, for example, I hope no one would say that Muslim people should be restricted in any way just because a tiny minority happen to be terrorists. They are unrepresentative of the Muslim community, and anybody who proposed to generalize against the whole Muslim community would rightly be shouted down. And I think it's the same with trans people. I have trans friends, and I have some who I've known for over 50 years. They are absolutely no threat to anyone. They are totally accepted by biological women. I also have a friend who works in a women's centre in the north of England, and with the agreement of both the staff and the women users, they have accepted trans women for the last 6 years. There's never been a problem, never been any incident or complaint whatsoever. So I think we have to keep things in proportion.
Well, I'll tell you where there is a big problem, Peter, and where I think we really do have to draw a distinction between biological sex and chosen gender, and that is in the field of women's sport. I mean, clearly, the case of the American trans swimmer, Leah Thomas, has led to so many women in sport saying, where is the incentive for a 14-year-old girl to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and train if she's up against somebody who went through puberty as a male, is 6'3", has a completely different body to that of a woman? I mean, surely there we have to draw some level of distinction between biological sex and chosen gender. Otherwise, it really is very, very bad news for women's rights.
Well, I totally agree there has to be fairness in sport, and that it is not right for women to be disadvantaged by other competitors for any particular reason. And again, we are talking about a tiny minority of trans athletes.
But that doesn't matter, does it? But that doesn't matter, does it? You know, if you set your life's goal on winning an Olympic medal and you come fourth because one of the people in the top three, you know, as I say, is 7 or 8 inches taller than you, has a completely different physical shape, you're going to be pretty upset.
Well, I can understand that. But again, I'll reference my own personal example. I have a biological female friend who is 6'4". Now, should she be excluded from sport because she has this huge height advantage? She was out of her biology.
I'm sorry, there are some very tall women, but they do not have the same bone structures and physical shape as men who have been through puberty and then have decided to change later in life. What are we going to do? I mean, are we going to bring in some rules in sport that make it fair for women, or are we going to turn a blind eye, Peter, and say it's only the odd exceptional case?
No, we mustn't look the other way. We must be fair. And I would favour individual assessment. So look at each individual trans athlete. You know, do they have a demonstrable proven advantage? It's not always the case that they do. I have a friend who plays for a women's football team. She, among the team players, among the women, she is one of the smallest. She's got a very small physique. She's towered over by some of the biological women.
Wow.
There's no way that her participation in that football team gives her an unfair advantage.
All right. And a final thought, Peter Tatchell, if I may, on the extraordinary events of last Friday, where the government managed to U-turn twice in the space of 3 hours. What are your thoughts on those events last Friday?
Well, the government promised us a ban on conversion therapy, full stop, way back in 2018, almost 4 years ago. It was reiterated in the Queen's speech last year, and indeed was confirmed last Wednesday in the House of Commons. It is a complete shambles. The government doesn't know its arse from its elbow. Really, it is symptomatic of the chaos and incompetence in 10 Downing Street.
I think on that point we are in absolute, complete and total agreement. Peter Tatchell, thank you for joining me this evening. So the what the Farage moment. So there we are. Fakenham, Swaffham, these are small market towns up in the north of Norfolk. Very nice places, I know both of them. But imagine you go into Wetherspoons for a pint. You go shopping in Waitrose. You go out and about in town, and who do you bump into? Quite extraordinarily, John Travolta. Yeah, Travolta is there in Norfolk, and there he is doing selfies with people. Now, would you recognise John Travolta? There's not much hair there. He's a bit older. I guess what gave it away was the fact that he had 2 bodyguards with him. But from what I can see, John Travolta has been thoroughly enjoying his time in rural England, and rural England is enjoying having John Travolta. And there's some wonderful quotes from locals. Really shocked. Never thought we'd see John Travolta in Fakenham. Well, there you are. You never, ever know. But it's a nice, little, happy story. Now, one of the areas that I have covered on this show, time and again, is the DVLA. And I was pretty critical of the DVLA because, of course, during all this difficulty with COVID, there were strikes that took place. And I thought that was wrong. Well, getting the latest up-to-date information, you know, if you're waiting for a driving test, you're waiting for a provisional licence, you've sent in your licence because it's expired and you're waiting for it to be renewed, the chances are you could be in for a long, long wait. I've had a lot of emails from people saying their great difficulties, some people not even able to go back to work because they haven't got a valid driving licence. Now, we have been in touch today with the DVLA and they've explained to us that the current number of paper applications waiting to be processed is 839,000. That's nearly 1 million people who are inconvenienced by what is going on at DVLA. They claim that this is not because of strikes. They claim this is not because of working from home. They say most people are back in the office. But Marmalade, who are a big car insurer, their estimate is that when it comes to getting driving tests, for example, the backlog won't be cleared until January 2024, which leaves all sorts of people in a very difficult position. Well, joining me now, a case study on this is Laura Riddy, and she's waiting for her provisional licence. Laura, so you want to get your provisional licence. Do you have to have that? Do you have to have that before you can do the theory test and then, of course, the practical?
Yeah, you can't do anything without your provisional licence because you need, I think there's a number on it that you need to book your theory and your driving lessons, which I've been waiting for coming up to 7 months now.
So you've been waiting for 7 months for this. And are there lots of your friends in a similar position?
Yeah, there are. There are some that, you know, have had theirs and, you know, they've done their theory. And there are some that are also still waiting. Like, we can't get through to the DVLA, the tracking doesn't get updated, like, we don't get told anything.
And I can remember being your age and wanting to pass that driving test, wanting to get the first car, wanting to feel you're an adult, you're free. I mean, it's a really exciting thing to go through. Do you have a message for the DVLA, Laura?
I just think that it's really unfair that there are a lot of people that, you know, want to start becoming more independent, driving. Like, it's a new, like, chapter, and we haven't been able to go out for 2 years now. And now we're getting held back by something else.
And how do you get round this if you can't drive?
It's not easy. I have a job, and the only way I can get there is spending money on Ubers. As I would walk, but, you know, it's dark night still, the weather's awful, and it's not the safest.
No.
So it's costing me a lot of money.
No, I get it for all of those reasons, and you are one of many, many people in this position, and I cross my fingers for you that hopefully after this interview you go to the top of the list. Let's see. Laura Riddy,
I hope so.
Thank you for joining us.
It's okay.
And a DVLA spokesperson said, "We handle millions of transactions every month and our online services are working as normal and without delay. We've recruited more staff, increased overtime and opened new customer service centres to help reduce waiting times for customers. We are already back to normal processing times on vehicle paper transactions and aim to be back to normal processing for vast majority of drivers' applications by the end of May." They added that all staff whose role requires them to be on-site are on-site and urged people to make sure forms were filled out correctly and to use the online system to save time. So, there we are. Marmalade insurance. Everybody else, you're clearly all wrong. Channel 4 News, talk about a what the Farage moment. Channel 4 News is going to be sold off. It will no longer be in public ownership. Yes, I know it doesn't cost money, but it is a public service broadcaster. And it's being sold off because the world has moved on, the world has changed, and of course, there is uproar from much of the broadcasting establishment. All I can say is, as a public service broadcaster, they abused their position of trust. Channel 4 News became an anti-Brexit, hard, left-wing campaigning organisation with no sense of balance whatsoever. I'm pleased to see what's happening. At 8 o'clock, at the top of the hour, Mark Stein is going to be with us. He joins me now to tell us what's coming up.
I'll second what you just said about Channel 4. I was actually shocked when I watched Channel 4 News for the first time in several years. You're absolutely right there, Nigel. I also like that thing where Peter Tatchell was talking about keeping things in proportion. We're going to try and do a bit of that tonight, and we're trying to get, at the same time as talking about some things you're not supposed to talk about, like whether we are on the verge of a political earthquake in France and government bureaucrats asserting that there is modern slavery right here in all corners of the United Kingdom. That's all coming up at 8, Nigel.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. And certainly the opinion polls that are coming up from France showing Marine Le Pen much closer, potentially in the second round, to President Macron than anybody could ever have believed. A couple more thoughts from you on Rwanda. Belinda says, if this really happens, it will be brilliant. We are spending millions upon millions on these illegal immigrants. It has to stop. Well, if it was to stop it, yes, but don't forget, it'll be very, very expensive to send people to Rwanda. Jeff says, I'll only believe offshore processing in Rwanda when I see it. And finally, Andrew says, yes, hurry up and get on with it. It may not be perfect, but the more difficult we make it, the greater the disincentive. I will be joined in a moment in the GBNews Tavern by Brad Moore, actor. We'll talk to him about many things.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
It's the best part of the day. Yes, the GBNews Tavern has been declared open. I'm joined by Brad Moore, film actor and director, and he's joining me here on Talking Pints. And welcome to the programme.
Cheers. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, we saw this morning on pretty much every front page of our newspapers and acres of print and large obituary columns, June Brown, better known as Dot Cotton, died aged 95, and here she is, and because this was the role, wasn't it? Dot Cotton in EastEnders, which she kind of made her own. And I just sort of was thinking to myself, I looked through the obituaries, Brad, and, you know, she'd been in Z-Cars, she'd been in The Sweeney, she'd been in Doctor Who, she'd briefly been in Corrie, she'd acted with some of the greats, she'd appeared in films.
Dixon of Dock Green.
Dixon of Dock Green, there we are, I forgot that one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, unbelievable career. She was 95. She was still on EastEnders in 2020. How many actresses or actors reach that level of prominence?
Oh, she's a national treasure, isn't she? I mean,
I think so.
We've got some great actors and actresses. She was wonderful. Such a real person and so authentic on screen.
Yeah.
You know, and just she directed theatre. I don't know if you spotted that. I was just reading about her a moment ago. I mean, what a life!
A classically trained actor.
Classically trained.
Who could put on any voice, turn her skills to anything, really.
Yeah, and you know, it just struck me in that old school vein, no reality TV, no quick turbo fame, you know, had to tread the boards.
Yeah.
And had to, you know, learn the ropes and learn her craft and come through that way. I mean, she's wonderful.
Now, very different background to you, Brad, because kind of acting wasn't really your thing, was it? You know, kicked out of college and you then...
Yeah. You know why I was kicked out?
No, go on.
Breakdancing. I would be practicing breakdancing in the gym, and the head of the college kept catching me doing it. I just desperately wanted to breakdance. And I don't know if you know anything about breakdancing.
I know what it is.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to master, so I was obsessed with that, which I guess lets you into a little bit of my personality. And I couldn't stop myself keep going in the gym, and in the end he said, if you keep breakdancing, you're out, and then one day I was out. So.
And off you go to be an estate agent, a magazine publisher, a finance broker, and then, I mean, were you bad at all those things?
No, I was reasonable at all those things. You know, like I was jack of all trades, you know, that thing. I could apply myself and get pretty good at something. But I must have had identity issues or something at the time, because I was trying all these things. And then I was at the cinema, which we all love, and, you know, and that's a special place for me, obviously, being an actor and a filmmaker. Yeah. And I remember thinking, you know, you watch someone flying a helicopter, you watch a fireman or a soldier or someone, because they're all in heroic roles. And I don't know if you did this, but you put yourself in the protagonist's...
You try to, yeah.
Yeah, you put him in his shoes. And I was thinking, well, I could do that. I could do this. I could do the other. And it struck me one day, they're all actors. So they're getting to do a little bit of everything, aren't they? They're getting to live out their fantasies and, you know, play out all these wonderful fantasies on screen. So I started acting instead.
But you've not been... you know, professionally trained. You were what, pushing 40 at that moment? Or?
I was literally 40 when I started, yeah.
So how do you become an actor?
Oh, God, that was weird. I mean, clearly it's some kind of midlife crisis, you know. But it's a special spin on a midlife crisis, I think, because the Germans call it, I don't know if you know the word, it's called Torschlusspanik, which is, because I always wanted to be an actor. So,
you did?
Yeah, from the age of 10,
all right.
I lived next door to Pauline Quirke.
OK, wow, yeah.
And she used to, just a quick backstory before we go back to the front story, but basically she'd come out of Anna Scher and she'd want to continue her training. So we were in a council estate in Stamford Hill, a place called Gibson Gardens, and I was good friends with her brother Sean. And she'd come in and she'd play all these crazy games with us on the street, cobbled street, chairs. So she then became the director of extracurricular drama training. And I was about 10 years old and got the bug, and the feeling of it never left me. So I just suppressed it, try to go out and make a few quid, as you would, you know, the tough, acting's a tough game. And then as I was approaching 40, I got this thing that I just mentioned, which is, I got to make sure I say it correctly, Torschluss Panik, which is doors closing behind you. So you're running out of time to do all those things that you are passionate about or that you have in your heart's desire. So I just quit my job. My business partner at the time thought I was absolutely nuts, as you would. And I said, I'm going to go and do stand-up comedy. So I did stand-up first, because that's kind of more of a working class art. So my family cringed less when I said I'm going to go and do stand-up. I know it might be hard to understand, but we're very working class. The art's not in our paradigm. So I said, I'm going to go and do stand-up. So they were like, oh, OK. Because it's quite brave, isn't it, stand-up? OK, you're going to go and try and be funny, that's all right. If I had said, you know, or, you know, coming like I'm a tortured artist, they'd have been like, shut up, you silly sausage, you know, get back to doing whatever you do. So I did stand-up, then moved into acting.
And you got some great roles. I mean, how did you get in these films? How did you get in The Rise? How did you get in North v South? How did you get? I mean, how does it happen? Is it networking? Is it being pushy?
It's a little bit of everything, you know. I think the first thing is you've got to really want it badly, you know, because you've got to want it. I had to the stand-up, and I did 25 short films, so that was like my drama school. So I learned on the job. I would turn up in a short film, and I think there's a big short filmmaking community in London. They'd see me in something, realise I'm cheap, and then I'd get cast through 6 degrees of separation. So I did like 24 short films in a 2-year period, and then did the stand-up at the same time, which is brutal. You know, stand-up is real turbo training in terms of your performance. So I did the short films and the stand-up, and that really got me kind of ready for feature films. I also was part of a production company that made films, so that gave me another little in and a bit of an angle, and that's how the Timothy Spall one came around. Yeah,
I saw that. And then Gloves Off, of course, which you sort of helped to write, and very much one of your babies, with some great people you acted with in that, didn't you?
Oh, Gloves Off was... It's still the apart from my son being born, it's the best 6 weeks of my life, without a shadow of a doubt. Denise Van Outen, Ricky Tomlinson, Paul Barber from the Full Monty. And we just had so much fun. Ricky would just... I mean, have you met Ricky? I don't know.
No, I haven't.
OK, so he's just like Tommy Cooper and Eric Morecambe. He's just got funny bones, you know. He is one of the funniest men I've ever met. And he would just continually and perpetually tell jokes. So everyone's morale's up and you're having a good time.
But the actual film itself, I mean, it's quite a brutal subject, Gloves Off, isn't it?
Well, it was comedy, but prize fighting's brutal. Yeah. So we try to get the balance of the comedy and the vice.
So it wasn't glorification of it.
It's not glorification of it. Just trying to be a comedy drama, really. Trying to keep it light. Like it was in the vein of the Full Monty. In fact, the Sun called it the Full Monty. So it's like that, brassed off, East is East, but with a bit of traveller prize fighting thrown in. I was going to say something quickly about Ricky as well, which is you have to avoid him if you've got some dramatic work to do.
Right.
So basically, because he makes fun all the time, if you've got to go and be emotional somewhere, I'd have to keep away from him for about 4 hours. Because he'd just have you giggling.
We better get him on talking. We better get him on Talking Pints, because I think he and I politically would disagree, but we probably do it in a nice way, you know.
Yeah. Well, he had a lot of trouble in the 70s, didn't he? I say trouble, it was his cause.
No, I know that. It's interesting, really, Brad. You start off in stand-up comedy, and you clearly love humour and comedy still. Isn't life getting difficult for comedians in terms of what you can talk about, what you can joke about, safe spaces, cancel culture, people's gigs being stopped? I mean, it's getting harder, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised I'm still on. I thought I'd be cancelled already. I was fully expecting a hook to take me off, because I can easily say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, as a comedian, you have to speak from the heart. And I get things wrong occasionally. I don't do stand-up anymore, but just generally trying to be funny in life, you know, in the pub or whatever.
And you might be slightly inappropriate or whatever, and in the old days you'd have said, oh, I'm sorry, that was a bit off.
Yeah, you don't mean anything about it. There's no malice, but you're... Basically, when you make gags, you're taking a risk each time, aren't you? You're rolling a dice on a gag. And, you know, I say to my son, I get the odd tumbleweed that my son and all his mates don't laugh at, you know, and I'm sort of sitting there like, please laugh. But I say to him, you know, well, I've just made 18 good gags and you've got the one rubbish one. But you've got to take a risk, so...
But where does cancel culture take comedy? Or is there going to be a pendulum swing that sort of reverses back?
I was just thinking, I couldn't imagine being a comic right now, these last 3 or 4 years. You know, they're going after Joe Rogan at the moment. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I can't think of a more balanced. Joe's very right in some ways, very left in other ways. To me, with the people that I watch on YouTube, he feels like he has kind of some balance. He's clearly a nice guy underneath it all, but they're going after him.
They're going after him.
Oh, yeah,
big time. Well, he's too successful as well, isn't he?
Oh, I think £100 million deal is one of the reasons why they're going after him, isn't it? But is he too big to be cancelled?
In the end, I think the tech giants are so big. They cancelled Donald Trump.
Then he's not too big to be cancelled.
So he's not too big.
No, he's not too big to be cancelled.
But a thought on all of this, Brad, because, the one thing that I've noticed over the years is that the best stand-up comedians, the best humorists, are those who observe human nature, human mannerisms, but also they observe the world around them. They get the mood.
Richard Pryor. People like that.
Where do you feel we are as a country at the moment?
Oh, God. I actually am feeling more and more like a fish out of water. Not just it was Brexit 4 years ago, then, these big media roller coaster.
What's wrong with Brexit?
Nothing wrong with Brexit. You did a very good job. And your hair is so beautifully grey. I now know why Brexit happened. Some old ladies voting for it. It's got a really nice sheen in this light. It's clearly the hair is the reason Brexit happened. But this roller coaster, Brexit, COVID, the war now.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling more and more like a fish out of water in this world. I got a parking ticket at a petrol garage about a week ago. I got the petrol, I had a coffee, I cleaned my car around the back because I'm lazy. I don't do the whole, do-it-yourself thing. I like to stick a thing and then check out my social media, and just sit back and watch the car get cleaned. And 3 days later, I got a parking ticket, or 2 days later, I got a parking ticket. What's that all about? It takes you 3 hours to get through to a bank to talk about your account.
Yeah.
It takes you 3 hours to get a utility bill paid.
There's a bit of frustration in the country, isn't there?
I just don't. 20 years ago, I don't remember those all being.
No, I know. No, I know. Well, look, I'll tell you what, Brad. What we need you to do is keep on producing entertaining content, funny content. Because above all, what we need to do in any situation is to go on having a smile, isn't it?
And that is crucial, because with the cancel culture and everything that is happening, with all that, our comedians just getting more and more shut down, and eventually so terrified to say anything that nothing's funny anymore.
Keep fighting, and thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. Very, very good.
I could keep talking all afternoon, couldn't I?
You really
could.
Yeah,
cut on Brad. Cut on Brad. All right.
It's Barrage the Farage. We have a couple of minutes left on programme, and I love to take these questions, which, of course, I've not seen before. Here goes, and I always bring the guests back in. David asks, which actor do you think would be best to play you in a film about your life? Who should play me, Brad? Goodness knows, that's not easy, is it?
Play you. Crikey.
I was once compared to Mr. Bean, which I thought was a bit unkind.
He hasn't seen your hair in this light. You're far more.
So it could be Rowan Atkinson. I don't know.
Can I come back to you on that?
Yeah, come back. Have a think.
I'll think.
Have a think. Here we go. Mary asks, this is all directed at you, not me. This is great. The pressure's off completely. What is your favourite film?
One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, just
without
fantastic.
a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, Jaws is up there, but you have different favourites for different genres.
Yeah.
As an actor, we love different.
And Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. Oh my God. My son's nickname for me is McMurphy, the character from One Flew Over, because I'm flawed and because I'm a nutcase. I'm a nutcase, basically.
Paul asks, with the Eagles smashing Arsenal 3-0 last night, what would you say to Piers Morgan and Corbyn? Great result for the Eagles last night, and they're playing a different kind of football this year. It's so much more entertaining, and Palace now an upper half of the Premier League team, and of course, semi-final at Wembley, 17th of April against Chelsea. Wishing them really, really well. Now, let's have one more. Fraser asks, an afternoon on the shores sea fishing or on the riverbank fly fishing during the salmon run. Look, I love my fishing. If there were more salmon in those Scottish rivers, I would go back to Scotland, but I'm afraid the salmon numbers are too few. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Brad, thank you for being with me this evening. In a moment, Mark Stein, you know what he's going to be talking about. He's never, ever, ever dull. First, though, let's get the weather.
Good evening. Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. strengthening winds will bring a colder feel for most tomorrow. There'll be some sunshine, but most places we'll see a few showers during the day too. Here's the bigger picture. Weather system moving in. Tucked in here, we've had some pretty mild air for most, but northern Scotland's been poking out into the colder air, and that's why we've seen some heavy snowfall across the far north, easing off over the next couple of hours, turning to rain and a wet and windy night across Orkney. Otherwise, it'll be rain showers moving in, some clear spells, temperatures not falling too far, certainly for most places. But as the rain clears from northern Scotland, well, we could see things turning a little icy here as temperatures drop down close to freezing. On to the details for Wednesday. It stays wet and windy in Orkney. Elsewhere, it'll be a breezy day with that breeze throwing showers across all areas. Plenty of them in the west. Even further east, though, I think we'll see showers developing as we go through the day. There will be sunny spells between the showers. It won't rain all day, far from it, and when the sun's out, we could still get up into the mid-teens. But with a strengthening wind, it will feel a bit cooler than today for sure. And the wind's getting lively on Wednesday night across Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, and then picking up everywhere as we head into Thursday. A bitter wind developing too. There are chance of some more persistent rain across southernmost counties during Wednesday night and into Thursday. And further north, the showers turning more and more wintry as temperatures again fall down close to freezing. So again, the potential for things to be a little icy. On to Thursday then, and the wet weather in the south. As I say, some uncertainty about how much we see on Thursday morning, but it should clear away, and then generally sunny spells. Further north, more showers, turning more wintry, snow on hills, sleet, hail at low levels, and temperatures only in single figures for the vast majority. When you add on that wind, it really will feel bitter during Thursday afternoon. Goodbye.